Hello and welcome to my review of the Legiones Astartes Cerberus Heavy Tank Destroyer for Warhammer the Horus Heresy from Games Workshop. One of these tanks will cost you £70, which means it's the same price as both a Typhon siege tank and a Spartan assault tank, and consists of 221 plastic components, which is exactly the same number of components as the Typhon, and in fact 8 components more than the Spartan. So this Lord of War tank has the second highest number of components of any of the other tanks in the Horus Heresy range. The number one place, of course, is the Kratos tank at 233. It's a massive project, and that tank costs £80. How does this compare to the Forge World kit? Well, the Forge World kit, when I picked it up at least 5 years ago, was £100. So that's not too bad that it's now, 70 compared to 5 years ago. And then when you factor in, you could probably get it at a discount for about £56. Then you'll realise that it's about half price compared to the resin counterparts. As I usually say, plastic is a more convenient material to use over resin. However, because you can't have very large pieces and combined pieces in plastic, it's going to result in these plastic tanks consisting of 200 parts, whereas the resin kit will take you much quicker, whereas the resin tank is way quicker to build. We're talking 4 or 5 times quicker to build overall, because with the resin kits, the whole tracks and the side panel are just one piece, as opposed to about 30 plus pieces per side, and that's not even including the 11 tank tracks per side. That's 22, and then you're looking at 4 sides to file down and clear the mold lines up, which would be 88 kind of sides to clean just on the tracks alone. So it's definitely a project. The format of this review is, as always, we'll have a look at the miniature a bit closer up, look at the detail, talk about how easy it was to build, compare it to the Typhon. I'll go through all the spare parts, of which there are a decent number. Then I'll go through the size comparisons and compare it to the resin Forge World model, as well as some dreadnoughts and things. And then finally, at the end of the review, I will go through all of the rules. So it's quite an exhaustive review today. So let's have a look at the Mini itself. Absolutely fine to build, no issues. Of course, it will take you a while, but you view one of these £70 tanks as a project. It's a Lord of War choice, so you may potentially get 2. Although it's a Lord of War choice, you are allowed 2 in a unit, which is odd, because isn't that technically 2 Lord of War choices? So my question is, really, is it a Lord of War choice? Before, Cerberus and Typhons were and even Spartans to some extent, were described as super heavy. They're on a Spartan chassis, but they had all the weaponry and things associated to bigger vehicles, but they included much bigger, heavier weaponry on this Spartan chassis platform. But then somewhere along the line, they decided that they weren't super heavy, and that they were a Lord of War choice, which sort of limits you down to, I say 1. You can have 2 in a unit, but I'm not sure gamers would use 2 in a game. I mean, if I was definitely going to have 1 Lord of War choice, I'd pick a Primarch or a Thunderhawk or a Baneblade or Falchion, something like that, over these 2 tanks. There are a number of reasons. The weaponry isn't a massive leap over the standard weaponry that you can get on other tanks, and also the armour. There's a big elephant in the room with this armour, in that even though they're Spartan chassis, the armour on the rear is actually worse than a Spartan. It's 13. Even though when you're building the tank and things, it's exactly the same process on the rear. So I don't understand that whatsoever, because all this back paneling and things is exactly the same. It's not like you know, there's a moving door to put ammunition in, or another escape hatch, and actually even the armor on the sides, the door paneling is blocked off. You don't need to. You can still have your doors at either side, but you're given this extra armor plate. So one would assume that the rear armor, which is probably like that, might include a little bit of that, those sides, but it should be the same as a Spartan, as a bare minimum, and it isn't, and I don't think people will accept that. But anyway, the main difference between the Typhon is of course this front weapon. It has the triple barreled neutron laser battery, which gives its tank the name of heavy tank destroyer, and it is a tank destroyer. Other than that rear armor being 13, you know, this neutron laser battery, it is fantastic. You know, you got 4 shots at 72-inch range. It's going to be melting most armor that you put in front of it, and 4 shots is still pretty decent. I'm not quite sure why there's 4 and not 3. In previous iterations there were 3, I believe, but we'll go on to the rules of this weapon later. Everything else went together quite well on the tank. You've got the classic, I say classic now, they've been around for a year, you know, side sponsons, which you can hot swap between all of them. So if you do have a Typhon with heavy bolters, then you can just, you know, put the heavy bolters on here to give the tank a little bit of an anti-personnel kind of point defense armament instead of the las cannons. I like having the las cannons on there just because there's no messing. That's what this tank is. It's anti-tank, and you've got 6 shots there of, you know, if you're not going to blow up a tank with those 6 shots, then yeah, you know, I don't know what's going on. The top is all new. This whole paneling is totally different to the Typhon. This cupola area is also different to the Typhon. This top armor that surrounds the neutron battery is different. They say don't glue the weapon to the sides, but I have, because you can't. It doesn't glue in tight enough so that you can move the main weapon, and I think that's such a shame. With this tank and the Typhon, that, you know, the focus of these are the main weapons, and I would have looked at the design to be better to incorporate the you know, being able to position and move that main weapon. With the Typhon, you can't really move it, and furthermore with that is there's a limit to the verticality of putting the weapon, whereas in the resin kits you didn't really have that. There wasn't that limit. You could put these weapons at quite ostentatious angles if you desired. But anyway, that's all the new kind of pieces here for this over the Typhon. I'm not quite sure why they needed to make 2 separate kits, and they couldn't just bundle both versions in one box. I think it's a box size limitation. You can't really squeeze these 2 sprues for the either of the weapons in the same box, and also then there's the confusion of which version do you put on the box itself. Do you put the Cerberus on there? Do you put the Typhon? Do you put a split? I understand kind of some of the reasons why they didn't go for a dual build, but it definitely would have been pretty cool if they did, and I don't think many people would be too bothered about the change at the top if you could just hot swap the weapons. And technically you can, if you leave all of this not glued. I mean, mine's not glued. A little bit of blue tack would be fine and good to go, and you could then take the Typhon you know, Dreadhammer siege cannon and put it on there. So that is a possibility, you know, if they were able to do that dual kit. But as it stands, we've got 2 different kits. All it really is the vehicle accessory sprue, the Predator side sponson sprue, and the Spartan tank sprues, and then those extra 2 sprues for the different variant of Cerberus or Typhon tank itself. So that's everything I wanted to talk about, kind of building and the options and things. Let's have a look at the spare parts, of which, you know, I didn't really use much of the vehicle accessory sprue, as detailed here. You're not going to use the dozer blade. You might use one of the pintle mounted weapons. It can use pintle mounted weapons. You've got searchlights, you've got the hunter killer. I was toying with the idea of putting a hunter killer, but I couldn't quite work out where to put it. I didn't want to put it on the weapon cowling, I didn't want to put it on here. Yeah, and on neither sides it just looks a bit mismatched. But yeah, that's your vehicle accessory sprue. And then these are all the parts for that's kind of left for this Spartan, really. And these are the extras. So you've got the side weapons that I didn't use, such as the Volkite. You've got the top turret mounted weapon. You've got the side doors, and you've got little extras like this. I tried putting this on the front there, but you can't really see it because of how low it is. And I've already got some filigree, some icons on the side, but you've got some smoke launchers and the las cannons and the heavy bolters and the heavy flamers and things. So not a huge amount of spare parts with this one. It was a similar story with the Typhon. Okay, so size comparisons. The first size comparison I'd like to make is just with the Typhon itself. So here is the Typhon. They are exactly the same size. I'd probably say that Cerberus has a little bit more presence, just because it pulls out a bit longer because of that neutron laser battery. Although the Typhon does have the Dreadhammer siege cannon, along with that blast shield too. I've built them with Space Marines out the top in the Mark II armour. I think it works fine. I've got this Typhon with the Space Marine kind of looking out with his omniscope or whatever, and I've got this Space Marine, you know, dialing something in or checking readings, I don't know. But they're not battened down, you know, inside the tank. I wanted to build them like this because my other two resin variants don't have them peeping out the top, so I wanted to give a bit more variancy in the range. Speaking of which, here is the resin version of the Cerberus. For some reason the resin one looks bigger. Not sure what it is. It might just be because the weapon's tilted up a little bit more, but yeah, differences, of course, as I've mentioned, this whole piece here, along with the tracks, is just one piece. Obviously, these side doors are separate resin doors. The weapons on the side, I've got big magnets in, and I can hot swap them with my other resin kits, so that's fine. But in terms of the plastic kit, they have, I would say, exactly the same. Maybe the plastic kit goes out just a tiny bit further, but other than that, they can rotate and then they can move, so you've still got that freedom. The differences in the kind of aesthetics, though, are very, very minimal. You get slight upgrades in detail on the resin, on the weapon and the cowling and things, but overall it would be difficult to spot. If anything, I'd say the tracks look a little bit thinner, possibly, and of course then there's the sides that you could easily spot. But I like that there are two now, and I think they go pretty well together. So other comparisons I'd like to make today then is with the 80-pound tank, the largest tank, I guess, well, lengthwise at least, the Kratos. So that's where it measures up with the Kratos. If you have a Spartan already, you'll know how big the Cerberus will be. Speaking of which, here is a Spartan tank. It's a shame that you can't have the quad las cannons on an actual tank destroyer. You know, maybe that's too much room. But the thing is, the Spartan can carry, what, 25 Space Marines or so. So, yeah, I think they could have put more energy banks for a quad las cannons. Maybe that would be a bit OP. You know, in a perfect world, I'd love the Cerberus to have, you know, dual quad las cannons for the sponsons. and also armor 14 at the rear, but you know, that's a little bit of a dream I have. And then compared to sort of Predator sized tanks, you know, so we have a Predator there. So if you already have a Predator with like dual las cannons and things, I keep forgetting that I've glued this turret in so I can move it about. But if you already have Predator, that's where it will measure up. And likewise with a Rhino, the Cerberus will dwarf your Predator sized tanks. I did miss out another comparison, and that was with the Sicaran, but yeah, if you've have a Spartan, then you'll know that Sicaran is a little bit smaller. Height wise, I think the Sicaran is a little bit taller, but that's not including if you put a Space Marine at the top there. Okay, just a few more size comparisons then. I do have a Contemptor Dreadnought right here. So that might be your typical Contemptor Dreadnought. Again, this weapon is going to outperform dual las cannons for range, for strength, for AP. Then I have a Leviathan Dreadnought right there. So it gives you an idea of just how big one of these tanks is for your force. And then a couple more kind of Horus Heresy comparisons. We have Mark 6 and a Mark 3, as well as a smaller Mark 4. So it works quite well, especially with Mark 3s, I think, this tank. We've got some 40k miniatures, why not? You can use this vehicle in 40k under sort of like Legends. You have been able to with Imperial Armour. So you've got a Primaris, you've got a normal Space Marine, and then Sly Marbo just rests under the barrel of the weapon there. Okay, so you've reached my part of the review where I will go through all of the rules for the Cerberus Heavy Tank Destroyer. As I've mentioned earlier in the review, you'll find it in the Lords of War section of your Legiones Astartes army book. It will cost you 425 points, which is the same points cost as the Typhon. And in the same vein as the Typhon, a Legion Cerberus squadron may take up to one additional Legion Cerberus for 410 points each, the same as the Typhon. So if you choose to pick two in one Lord of War option, then you are going to be saving yourself 15 points. However, I do need to point out that there are other Lords of War choices, such as your Primarch, your Legion Glaive, your Fellblade, your Falchion, your Thunderhawk, your Mastodon, and your Stormbird. So the Cerberus, its stat line reads, it's a movement of 10 inches, ballistic skill 4, front and side armour both 14, however, the rear armour is 13, which is not right, and it has 6 hull points. The war gear, it has a centre line mounted neutron laser battery, 2 sponsor mounted heavy bolters, a flare shield, smoke launchers, special rules, Legiones Astartes, and reactor blast. So let's go through this main weapon and why I think this is such a better upgrade compared to the Typhon's Dreadhammer. Well, for starters, the Dreadhammer siege cannon is the same range as the Demolisher cannon. Yes, it has a large blast of 5 and it has a rending of 4+ instead of the 6, and it has a brutal 4 instead of 3. And it still has the AP of 3, but this is so much more of an upgrade compared to your normal neutron beam laser. For starters, it's double the range. So instead of it being 36 inches, it's 72 inches, which is fantastic. It means that this is your sniper tank. To have a weapon that can deal out so much damage over such a distance means your opponent with their 5, even 10 man las cannon equipped Devastator squad, it is really going to feel the pain if you're using this to its full advantage. Speaking of which, as I say, the range is 72 inches, it's a strength of 10 and it's AP 1. So already that's melting Space Marines, it's melting Terminators from a distance of 72 inches. It's ordnance 4, so you're getting your 4 shots at a, you know, ballistic skill of 4. Concussive 3, feedback, shock pulse, and gets hot. We'll go through those rules now. So firstly, it has a flare shield, and if you didn't know what a flare shield was, it reduces the strength of shooting attacks made against its front armour by -1 or -2 if that shooting attack has a blast special rule or uses a template to determine its range. It has no effect on shooting attacks inflicted with weapons of the destroyer type. So that's amazing. So if you're, you know, if las cannons are firing at it and they're strength 9, it's reducing that strength to 8. So glancing hits only, you know, you're getting this, your 6s to go through it. I can't think of any other weapon that has feedback other than this one. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but feedback, if the weapon with this special rule fails its armor penetration roll against a target with an armor value, or fails to wound roll against any other model, you roll a d6. If the result is a 1, the attacking model loses 1 hull point or wound. Now that's quite significant. So if it fails to penetrate, and I can't see why it would, then, you know, it's gonna come back onto the tank and knock off one of those 6 hull points, which is, you know, can be disastrous. And then when you factor in, it also has the gets hot rule, which we all know on hit rolls of a 1, the firing model suffers a wound with an AP value to that of the weapon it used in attack. For vehicle, you roll a d6 in each roll of a 1, for each roll of a 1 to hit, and then if it results in a 1 or 2, the vehicle suffers a glancing hit. So not too bad with the gets hot. It's the feedback you've got to be careful with it not penetrating its target. And then concussive is a rule where if a unit suffers 1 or more wounds, regardless of whether those wounds are saved or otherwise, from a weapon with the rule, it must take a leadership at the end of the shooting phase. So, you know, whether they're saved or not, they're going to need to take that leadership test. So yes, compared to the typical neutron beam laser that you get on the Sakaran, or even the neutron blaster that you get on the Saber tank, this is a big upgrade. It's double the range of that neutron beam laser. You get double the shots, but at the cost of feedback and shock pulse, which I guess I should also talk about as well. Any vehicle, including super heavy vehicles, dreadnought or automata model that suffers a penetrating hit or unsaved wound from a weapon with this special rule may only fire snapshots on the following game turn. So that could be incredible, because it includes super heavy vehicles. Does it include Titans? It is a super heavy vehicle. It would be nice if it did. I can't see why it wouldn't, but yeah, if you've got the unsaved wounds or penetrating hit, then you're knocking that vehicle out. You know, so if you're firing this at a Kratos, think about all the weapons a Kratos has. You know, if you're firing at a Spartan, think about those quad las cannons that it's not going to be able to fire. So very useful. Any Legion Cerberus may exchange both its sponsor-mounted heavy bolters for one of the following. You've got 2 sponsor-mounted las cannons, which mine has, for 10 points per model. 2 sponsor-mounted heavy flamers for free. Sponsor-mounted Volkite culverin for 10 points, and then you may take any of the, one of any of the following. So pintle-mounted twin-link bolter for 5 points. Combi weapon for 10, heavy bolter for 10, heavy flamer for 5, multi-melter for 20, havoc launcher for 15. May also take hunter killer for 5 and searchlights for 5. Out of all of those, I'd probably take the hunter killer if I had the choice. I've got plenty of hunter killer missiles dotted around, so I can always add them onto the vehicles if I wish, if I could find a decent place to kind of put them. On the Spartan, I managed to fit them to the right of the Spartan, but that's because there is a place to do so. On these Cerberus and Typhon, on the right hand side, that's all kind of taken up by the either the extractor fan, I want to call it, or this heatsink thing for the Cerberus. I don't think there's any point in taking multi-melter or pintle mounted heavy bolter, unless you're expecting to fight up close. But with this particular unit, I think it's best from afar, you know, with its front armour facing the enemy, sniping off 5-10 man Devastator squads, Terminators that are out in the open, Primarchs even, if you can see them. Other tanks, especially super heavy tanks, you know, you fire this at a Fellblade, you're knocking out its accelerator autocannons. You fire it at the Falchion even, if you're in range, that is, because that, you know, Falchion has the twin link volcano cannons at 120 inch range. You're knocking a big weapon out there, because the volcano cannons are the strength 14, you see, and they're large 5-inch destroyer weapon blast. But as I touched on earlier, also firing at a Kratos would be a good use of it, because Kratos has so many weapons on its hull. I'm a big fan of the Cerberus. I think that the trade-off in the range is worth the feedback debuff rule, and also the gets hot doesn't really affect it that much. I think it's incredible strength weapon. I think it's a very decent strength weapon that you can kind of reach out and, you know, fire upon other units from distance. But you've really got to play to that strength. If you're using this vehicle on a battlefield that is 48 inches, you're sort of giving yourself an extra debuff rule because, you know, someone brings along like 5 or 10 las cannon Devastators, heavy support squad, whatever, then they're gonna, you know, have a field day firing 10 las cannons at this thing, even with the flare shield. Whereas if you're bringing it on a battlefield that's over 48 inches, then this is going to be able to snipe them, or it's going to be able to snipe other tanks. It's going to be pretty good against Spartans, but it's going to be super effective against Kratos tanks, Sicarans, Predators. It's going to one-shot them. But the reason why it's good against the Kratos is, especially with the las cannons, if you go in sort of 48 inches, is because it has the 4 shots, potentially could take out those 5 hull points, you know, coupled with the las cannons. And it's going to outrange and outperform all of the Kratos' main weapons. In 2 out of 3 instances, it's actually going to double the range, because it has that 72-inch range neutron laser battery. And that is double the range of both the Melter Blast Gun and the Kratos Battle Cannon. The Volkite Cardinal is just going to tickle this tank. So what do you guys think of the Cerberus? I'm a big fan still. I like a dedicated anti-tank unit in the force. I think it's better than the Typhon. Typhon's very specific and very short range at 24 inches. This tank, you can reach units 3 times the range away at a better strength and armor penetration, with some nice rules that mean that the enemy can only fire snapshots. What do you guys think though? Quite an exhaustive review, but one of my favourite units in Horus Heresy. As I've mentioned before, I don't necessarily agree that this should be a Lord of War choice or that the Typhon should be. I think they should just be straight up heavy supports like a Spartan. And I don't agree with the armour value on the rear being 13 instead of 14, considering they share the same chassis also as the Spartan. But what do you guys think? Please do put your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor Protects.